It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Our guest today is CEO April Foster. April's the founder and CEO of Ink Brands, the leader in influencer commerce. She's obsessed with combining relevant products, paid content, and smart marketing with influencer brands. April lives in Kentucky with her husband, Greg, and their 4 young children. April Foster, welcome into the corner office.
Hi, thank you. I am in a corner office today.
Well, that's good to know. And it's wonderful to have you here. As we talked before starting the podcast, I had a chance to take a look at some of the videos on your website. Very, very incredible stuff that you're doing. It's kind of the marketing services agency of the 21st century in many ways, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think in a lot of ways, we're kind of a reinvented version. We don't do a lot of marketing, that we leave that up to our partners, but it's a way for us to partner ourselves with them, and we do what we do best and they do what they do best.
Well, listen, we're going to have a deeper conversation about that because I want to be able to separately speak with you about how ROI might benefit from your services. But we'll get to that in a minute. What I really kind of wanted to start with today was hear a little bit about your early years. You know, entrepreneurs aren't born every day. And it would be great to hear what you were like as a kid and some of the things that you went through growing up.
Oh, goodness. I do feel like entrepreneurs are kind of born. It's very difficult to make an entrepreneur. It's kind of in your DNA.
Absolutely.
So, I can think back, and I grew up in Texas, in South Texas, where it's hot, humid, and there's lots of mosquitoes. It's incredibly glamorous. And my dad and his family ran a lumberyard and home goods store in West Columbia, which, you know, just a piece of trivia, West Columbia was the first capital of Texas until they realized that there was lots of mosquitoes there and hot all the time. And they rightfully moved it. And so in West Columbia, Texas, they owned a lumberyard and hardware store. And I was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. And my mom would drop me off while she went grocery shopping in town. And my sister and I would make these greeting cards, if I use it loosely, out of typing paper and crayons, and then we'd go sell it to the customers in my dad's store.
Really? At 3 or 4 years old?
Yes. I mean, I really want to brag on myself here because I was like, what can we make? Like, how scrappy can we get? And we had 100% margin on these things, obviously. And we'd go sell it, and we didn't even have to pay. We just walk around to the patrons and we sell a piece of paper for 25 cents. And I just feel like my whole life has come full circle because, you know, my first main entrepreneurial event as an adult it was Studio Calico, and I sold paper. So and for good margins, not 100% margin. Sadly, nobody was giving me my supply for free. But yes, I do feel like my life in some ways has come full circle.
Well, that's awesome. So was that like an everyday thing? Was that on the weekends? How many years did you and your sis do that?
Well, I don't know. Probably just when my mom had to go grocery shopping and she didn't have another option. But I remember it vividly. And so I do feel like you learn those things early on. Like I could see, there's customers and they're here. So, and I like creating things. And then, you know, growing up, we moved to Tennessee when I was 8 years old, and we had moved from the country in Texas to the city, the suburbs in Tennessee. And, you know, there was a little bit of traffic down our dead end street, a little bit more than it was in the country. And we would
Right.
make all sorts of things. We'd make things out of Play-Doh and let them dry and sell those. And I mean, my poor neighbors took pity on us and bought things, but you do learn a lot in those early years
Absolutely.
selling things.
Was it door to door? Did you set up a table? Combination of both?
I was good at all that stuff. I just really, I liked making money because we didn't have any. So any money I
what
made
does a
was
4-year-old spend, her quarters on? I mean, were you encouraged to save? Was it something that you went and treated yourself with? What did you do with that newfound
So I
wealth?
have to commend my parents because they set me up on this system where I got 4 quarters a week and then any other extra quarters I made. And I would give 2 to charity, which usually to our church, and then
Nice.
save 1 quarter. And then I got to spend another quarter, which usually went towards
Cool.
stickers at the Hello Kitty store. So, so again,
your favorite vice at the
yes,
time, I'm
again,
sure.
stickers, paper, my life was full circle. So.
How fun. That's great. What other kinds of leadership or entrepreneurial things were you involved with in your younger years?
Well, so I guess this carried on to high school for sure. And when I was in high school up in Louisville, Kentucky, I was a part of, I don't even know what the class was, but I remember the teacher's name. His name was Mr. Robinette. And he also was a sponsor for the Future Business Leaders of America Club. So I participated in that and like lots of competitions. And then we ran the bookstore for our school. And I got to run that. And I can't remember how it came about, but we were going through all the types of things we could sell besides t-shirts, sweatshirts, and the like, and was looking for things that we could sell on a more regular basis. And we picked balloons because we had a helium tank, and at the school, because the school had a helium tank, and the school would buy the helium, so the bookstore didn't have to. And
there's your zero cost
exactly,
sales.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, we can order all these balloons, and people can send them like balloonograms to their friends, girlfriends, whatever. And that was incredibly successful. It paid for our class trip to New York, and again, it's like all these things point toward now with Studio DIY. The shop.studiodiy.com, we sell balloons, and I know about balloons, and I also know about helium, and I'm passionate about it. Helium is a dying, it's not going to be a resource that's available forever. So the price of helium has gone up considerably. So there's all this little knowledge that you collect along the way that I feel like is fun as it relates to products and sales and causes you to be conscientious about what you do.
So how did your needs change from Hello Kitty stickers when you were in your single digits to, your teenage years? Did you follow the same approach with charitable giving, savings, and spending things on your own? Was that a kind of an ongoing approach that your mom and dad shared with you?
I mean, as I got older, I had a lot more freedom in how I spent my money. But yeah, I'm very fiscally conservative. And I think that just comes from growing up with a family that didn't have a lot of money and didn't have a lot of things. You learn how to do more with less. And that is definitely a principle that has carried on to me throughout high school, college, and even now. My husband laughs at me, but he's like, April, we have money we can spend on this, but I don't want to.
My wife would call that savvy scrappy or scrappy savvy. Huh?
Yes, or cheap or frugal,
I like scrappy better. Just you and your sister, or were there other kids in your family?
Yes, just us. But I think that did lead me to have a lot of kids because I like playing games growing up, and the fun part of having a competition and strategy and whatnot. And I only had one person to play with, so a lot of times I didn't have to play solitaire or something by myself if she didn't want to play. So my husband and I decided early on we wanted to have several. We didn't know 4 would happen so quickly, but they did.
Twins are always a surprise, right?
Yes, to some degree. So my oldest is 7, Claire, and then Cal and Sam, the boys are twins. They're 5, and then Kit, our little surprise, is 4. She just turned 4.
So we had 4 under 8.
4 under 4 for 6 months, and that was, looking back on it, pretty rough. At the time, you just survive.
Well, it sounds like Dad moved around a lot when you were growing up. What kind of a job did he have?
So he left the family business and went into full-time preaching. That was a big change for our family, for sure.
And has faith been an important part of your life growing up as well and into your business practice?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's the common thread. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that if you held your faith near and dear, then that's what drives a lot of your decision
Yeah, that's awesome.
and how you interact with people.
So was your tithing done then when you were younger to the church primarily, or were there other charitable, giving that your parents encouraged you to do?
Oh, lots of other charitable giving. I think that it's partially because we would go to church every week. That's a convenient place to give. But yes, no, lots of other opportunities. And I did learn very early on from my parents to have a level of scrutiny in what charitable giving that we did
Yeah.
do. And my parents would probably, because we didn't have a lot of money, they wanted to make sure that when they gave it to charitable causes, it was actually getting to the people that
Right.
needed the money
Right.
or to the cause that they were trying to support. And so that's one of the things that I learned is you need to investigate those things and know where your money's going. And now I'm heavily involved in an organization called Sacred Selections,
Mm,
and they help, they give grants to Christian couples adopting. And so they've
nice.
funded about 300 or so adoptions over the past 10 years. And yes, 100% of the money that we give to them goes toward funding those adoptions. And I couldn't love the founders anymore. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. Back to your school years. We haven't
Yes.
talked much about your student life. So, were you a top student, A grade, valedictorian, kind of a B student, got by, or struggled through your elementary, high school, and junior high school years?
So I don't like talking about this because I'm almost embarrassed. I'm almost
No,
embarrassed about it. but no, so my parents, again, I think part of this is just like genetics. It's just like my parents got lucky with my sister and I that we were good students and that we were highly motivated.
Right.
But also I think they helped instill some of those values in us early on. But they never looked at our report cards. I will say
Oh,
that. Back in the old days when you got a report card and it was
sure.
folded and you had to bring it back to your
Oh, yeah.
folded and sealed, and you had to bring it back to your teacher signed. And my parents would sign the back and without breaking the seal. Of course, they knew we were doing well, but
Wow, that's interesting.
in my mind, they just asked me if I did my best, and if I did my best, they signed it. And so I learned quickly that it wasn't about it was about meeting the expectation. What's your aptitude? And if you can do it, you should. And you should always perform your best. And so I have never made a B in my life. Well, I mean, like on tests, but not like on a final grade.
Right.
And so even all through college. And so it's almost embarrassing because now when I interview people and when I look at job resume, I never look at the GPA. So I'm here to
Right.
say it does not matter
Yeah.
what grades
Yeah.
you make, but it matters what you learn and what you know and how you apply that. I think that is so important. And so, yeah, I almost laugh. I wish I would have spent more of my time gaining experience and studying for tests, but
You were too busy making money being an entrepreneur, learning about the world.
yeah, I was babysitting every night. Too bad I can't find a babysitter like that now.
There you go. Well, there's an interesting lesson there, and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about it. Your parents had a great degree of trust for you and your sister, signing the back of the report card. I must say that would have been a very difficult thing for me to do, not because of a lack of trust, but, it was a demonstration, it sounds like, really of their faith in you. Has that been something that you have tried to do in others, particularly in your organization as you've grown them?
For sure. And I think one of the biggest things that when I even have looked to when I hired our last COO is, I have to trust them, and especially somebody that's keeping control of the books.
Right.
But I'm in a lot of cases, once I decide I'm going to trust you, I'm almost too trusting. And
Mm,
so I'm very trusting of our employees. I'm very trusting of the people that we hire, but a lot of scrutiny is given to them on the front end.
yeah.
But once they're part of our team, we're off to the races and we're doing this together.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
yeah, I want to hire people with a high degree of integrity, but that along with that comes like an immense amount of trust that I place in them and in their aptitude and their ability to do the job and their ability to make smart decisions and do the best for the company, but also just like in life, do I trust you? Are
Yeah.
you a
Yeah. Very important.
good, awesome human being? And
Yeah.
most of the time, the answer is yes. I feel like there's so many good people out there that it's harder to find the bad ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, you got that obviously instilled at a young age. That's terrific. What about other activities during high school years? We talked a little bit about your entrepreneurial pursuits, whether it's sports, music, arts and crafts. Tell us a little bit about that side of your life.
Yes, all the geeky stuff. Sign me up for it. So, I was practically in every club, like in all the beta club and school vice president, president, whatever those clubs
Sure.
were.
Student government, right?
All the committee, student
Yeah.
government. Yes, thank you for helping me out there. FBLA, Future Business Leaders, did that. Did so many different clubs, but by and large, I spent a lot of my extra time babysitting.
Okay,
So
got it. Yeah.
practically like every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, I was babysitting and trying to sock away money.
What age did you start doing that, April?
I guess I started young whenever I was like 12 or 13 for Neighbor Kid.
Right.
And I had to learn CPR and all those good things that parents want you to know how to do. And in some ways, I feel like I was more qualified at age 12, but than I am now. But no, I started when I was 12, and then once I could drive, then I could go to the higher paying jobs.
Right.
So
awesome.
Outside the neighborhood, it was great.
And you did that all the way through high school?
All the way through high school, and even nanny through college, especially in the nights and in the summers, and always for 4 boys. Like it was either 2 couples that each had 2 boys, or it was one family that had 4 boys. So I really thought that I was destined to have 4 boys, and I didn't, but I did have 4. So I feel like I knew how to juggle 4 growing up.
Well, it sounds like you're well prepared for motherhood then as well. There's a big thing.
As much as one can
as
be.
Much as one can. You don't get a manual with that, right? No standard operating procedures. Well,
that's right.
You went to college. Tell us a little bit about, where and why, and kind of what were your motivations continuing on after high school?
So in high school, I knew that I would go to college. My parents both had college degrees. Right. My mom had her master's, and
it was expected.
Expected, but also just like, well, I don't know what I would do without going to college, And I think that's one of the things about living in Kentucky and in Tennessee is that most people go into a profession, and the medical professions are big here. And I was really good at a lot of things. And I find that in talking to other CEOs, that's true of them as well. You're good at a lot, but you're not really great at any one thing.
Yeah.
And so, I went to the Governor Scholar Program with a variety of people who made like perfect scores on their SAT or ACT for math or reading or, science or something. And they were just standout successes in one category. Right. And it was so easy for them to choose what their major was going to be and what their course in life was going to be. And I feel like that was really hard for me to choose. And so I chose speech pathology, which I'm clearly using.
Yeah.
Not.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Western Kentucky University. So I got a full ride to come down here. Awesome. And that played a huge part of my decision because my parent, like I said, we didn't have money growing up. Sure. And so I wanted to get out of college without incurring a lot of debt. And there wasn't
was
really
was it a scholastic scholarship or was it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Terrific. Scholastic. Yep. And so, I do not play sports. That's funny. But yeah, I wish I did. I wish I played sports, but I'm kind of not coordinated enough. If crafting was a sport, then I could do that. But no, I think that I didn't put as much thought into where I went to college and who I'd be connected with and the networking opportunities. And Western Kentucky is certainly a fantastic school, but and is actually now the second largest school in the state. Wow. And so it's a good place to come. But I could have probably been better prepared and from a business perspective had I gone somewhere else.
So speech pathology. So you did kind of a couple of years of general ed, I imagine, and then did more specialization your junior and senior. Did you envision yourself as going into that field, as a consultant or as a speech pathologist? What was kind of your thinking and how did that shift?
I thought I liked it. Yeah. I thought I liked it till I did an internship and realized that I was going to be making hardly any money and I was going to basically be babysitting. Yeah. So early on, now as you progress through your career, that changes. But the entry level positions, that's what it was going to be tough. It was going to be really tough with your master's degree to even make ends meet as a family. And so I was like, wow, I just had to do a lot of soul searching. Yeah. And at the same time, my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, was in a communications and business major. And I found what he was learning so much more intriguing. So I started auditing his classes and taking all the tests, but not getting the grades. I mean, you get the grades and you get partial credit, but it doesn't go against you if you don't make an A or B, or, it doesn't hurt you in any way. And so by the time I got to my senior year, I only had to take 12 hours per semester to graduate. And so I was auditing these extra, like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 extra classes a semester just to learn as much as I can. And loved that. And so as soon as I graduated with my bachelor's in speech pathology, I went almost straight into pharmaceutical sales.
So you did your internship between your junior and your senior year in speech pathology? Okay, got it. So that's when you kind of knew this wasn't for you.
Exactly.
Sales and pharma,
but I didn't want to like delay. I didn't want to delay getting my degree. And at the time, going into pharmaceutical, I thought, well, what way can I marry business and sales and what I really like doing with like a more clinical background? And so it seemed to make sense. And I, to be honest, I love every job I do.
How long were you in pharma sales?
For 5 years, wow. 2.5 years as a rep and 2.5 years as a manager.
With one of the majors, or were you with a regional company?
No. And that's one of the things I was so fortunate to get to join this company. It was called First Horizon. And then it sounds like a bank. And then they changed their name to Sael. And then they got bought out by a company called Shionogi out of Japan. And so it was a small, like $200 million company, but they were growing so rapidly. Yes. They were growing so rapidly. And I got exposed to so many things. And even just becoming a manager at the age of 25 is unheard of in, the larger companies. And so I got to sit on managed care committees and train new reps and go interview large pools of candidates because they were based out of Atlanta. So I could just hop down there when they were doing a big, when they would bring in a bunch of candidates all at once and do a big expansion. I got to help with like the realigning of the territories. And I just got exposed to so many things that I don't think I otherwise would have. That it was great. So I really feel fortunate. And it's funny because at the time I kind of felt embarrassed that I wasn't part of one of the big ones, but looking back on it, it was such a blessing.
And I'm sure it's helped form some of your decisions since then as well. So a couple of years as a sales rep and then a few years as a manager. Is that how it played out?
Yes, couple years as a rep, couple years, total of 5, but about half the time as a rep, half the time as a manager.
So what were some of your early leadership lessons in that role?
Well, for one is I had no clue what I was doing, so I knew I had to figure it out fast. So one is I found mentors and I found a guy named Kevin out of Michigan. He kind of adopted me under his wing, and another
a few years senior to you, or
yes. Oh, yeah. I was 25. Everybody was senior to me. But the good thing about me being 25 is I knew I did not know everything. I knew nothing. And then a lady named Tammy out of Alabama. So I had like somebody to my north and somebody to my south, and I would call them and get their advice whenever I could. And Kevin was awesome at setting up spreadsheets for me that I could just plop in and it really be an aid to my reps and helping them visualize their data. And then Tammy was so fantastic at like being like a tough woman before like girl bosses were a thing. And
she had to be tough to get where she was, I'm sure.
Yeah. And it's a male-dominated industry. I mean, being a rep, it was female-dominated, but being in management was definitely male-dominated. And so she was awesome. And both of them were, and still probably still are. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Tammy, if you're listening.
We'll make sure they get a copy of the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. They're awesome. But yeah, I think set up mentors. And for me, it was like learning everything I could about the industry that I could possibly retain. And that came from like, at the time listening to books on tape while I was driving or CD back in the day, and reading everything that I could, and asking reps, asking doctors, and really asking them from the position of like, I really wanted to know, not just I'm trying to make the next step in my career, but being passionate and attentive to what's going on in the industry. So, I think that, and then just basic like management 101, like 1 minute manager type lessons that you learn early on. So
what about your parents? Did they have any influence on your leadership style? You mentioned your father was a preacher, minister, and your mother had a master's degree. Did she work full time as well?
She worked part-time off and on. She worked full-time before my sister and I were born, but then part-time.
What kind of work did
Goodness,
she
they
do?
were. She worked as a speech pathologist, so that's kind of where that. But she told me I should be a lawyer, and she was probably right. So listen to your parents.
Right. But, so what kind of influence do you think they had, if any, on your leadership style? What were some of the leadership lessons you might have learned, maybe back in the lumber yard in the early days, or else?
I don't know. My parents are so interesting because I feel like I won the parent lottery, and then I tell my kids they won the grandparent lottery because, I mean, I had such a good home life. I mean, growing up, it was fantastic with my parents. They were so fair and so kind and so loving, and like they were truly like the parents that sacrifice everything for their kids. And I don't know. I think that I'm sure they made mistakes, and they could probably name every single one of them. But but in terms of like what I learned in terms of leadership is like the honesty, the fairness, the trust, and then I think my mom is probably, I don't know if you're familiar with behavior therapists, but my mom was probably one of the original ones back in the day, and just really was good at sticking to her guns on things and setting expectations that you didn't even know she was setting. Right. But and she's just so good at teaching and so patient, and and those types of things you have to be when you're a leader. You have to be. Not everybody's going to learn in the same way or at the same pace, right. And you're hiring,
or responds to the same style.
Exactly, and so I think that I learned a lot, and I didn't know I was learning, which is great. Right. Which is great.
Well, we learn that as parents too, as much as we'd like to think our kids are all the same and they're from the same seeds. From your own experience, as you told me earlier, your twins being about as different as Arnold Schwarzenegger and
Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito, exactly. So, I think that's what really one of the key things that we can choose from our parents. I know that as I observe my parents, I think my dad used more of a cookie cutter approach with each of his boys, whereas my mother, kind of understood some of those differences. And I think, the relationships kind of evolved because of that. And I think we recognize in our children, and hopefully in those that work with us, that, you can't really treat everybody the same way.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So how has your leadership style evolved over time? Would you describe it differently today than you would back then?
Well, I mean, I hope so, because I hope I'm making fewer mistakes and less impactful mistakes. Yeah. Now, I definitely would say I've gotten a lot more patient with age, and I'm 38, by the way, and I don't mind telling people, but I do think that when you're 25 and you want everything to happen now, versus when you get a little age underneath your belt, you have a little more patience toward people and understanding. And one of the pieces of feedback that I got early on in my management career, we had to do these 360 reviews, and that was awesome. I love that. And I wish we had the resources to do that in my company right now. As soon as we do have the resources, I want to do it because I think it's so very interesting. Yes. Yeah. And, but it's been like the constant feedback I've gotten throughout my entire life. So there was no surprise. And that was that, like, I need to work on my tact. And so I started doing a lot of and the mentors that I set up for myself, I would run emails by them or certain correspondence by them before I would send it, and just be my own policeman, you know? Yeah. And so I think I've definitely gotten better at that. I would say it hasn't gotten worse, but it's still an area of weakness for me. I still want things to happen now and as soon as they can possibly happen, and I still will push until the absolute limit because that's what you do as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and so I have to remember that and have to be mindful of it. And
well, you mentioned about tact. We recorded a podcast a few days ago, and one of the feedback the CEO got early in his career was that he had to know about diplomacy, and he said, "What's diplomacy?" literally had to go to a dictionary and, kind of understood it. So how on.
So I think my problem is the same as he's having. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, I expect everybody else to tell me exactly how it is, so why can't I tell
You can't be
them?
that same way.
It's the problem. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a very common thread with a lot of entrepreneurs, because you have a vision,
Yes.
you have a passion, and you just, you go the straight and narrow to get it done. And sometimes it's difficult to know that there are others that maybe don't either share that same entrepreneurial spirit or perhaps that level of passion, and you don't understand why, right? And
Yes, exactly.
It can be a challenge in that respect.
It can be a challenge.
Yeah, scrapbooking, we know in your bio is one of your first passions, and you turned that into a business. Had that been something you've been doing for a number of years, April?
Honestly not. I started, I learned about crafting. I was just a hobbyist in the scrapbooking industry, which is basically kind of extinct now, and it's sad. But
well, it's moved online too, right? And there's quite a bit of scrapbooking.
I mean, with social media, so many people just keep track of their memories digitally, and not that that's sad. That's not sad to keep track of your memories. I think that's fantastic. But there's just new and different ways to do it. But I got started when, honestly, I was on the road working at the pharmaceutical company. So I was managing 11 reps across 3 states, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio, and some of Southern Indiana. Wow. So 4, I guess. And I was in a hotel room about 3 or 4 nights a week. And so the first thing I did as a manager was make a quilt entirely by hand.
Oh.
And I did that in about 3 months. Then I thought, well, I got to figure out something else to do, because this is not going to hold my attention while I'm in the hotel room and like these tiny towns at night with all this time on my hands.
Right.
And so, so a friend of mine and I started talking about scrapbooking, and I had been to all these towns, and there were stores, but they weren't. The products that they had were outdated, and the products in the magazines, by the time the magazines made it to print, you couldn't get the product anymore.
They weren't Michaels.
Yeah, they weren't. And the product wasn't even barely at Michael's at the time. I mean, they may have had like a few supplies on the shelf, but not very many. And nobody was really pairing content and commerce. And so, that there was a hole in the marketplace, and there was this huge community of crafters and like-minded people. And I was one of them. And I was like, nobody is servicing us. And so I thought, well, I'll just do it. We'll just do it myself. You know, we'll just set out there. So, I started Studio Calico with about a $4,000 investment, which at the time seemed huge. And, just figured out through friends and through our developer who's still with us 11 years later, which is funny. I was in a wedding, and the groom is a graphic designer. And all I knew about him was that he was a graphic designer, and he must be a nice guy because he was marrying my friend. So once I decided I wanted to start a website, I was like, well, I got to have a designer. So I called him up, and he said, sure, I'll design. I can do your branding and logo work, but I can't do your website. I don't do that type of design. I was like, well, then who does? And he says, well, I've worked with this guy named Kenan, and maybe you should talk to him. I was like, okay, well, let's get on with Kenan. He's like, well, he's in Germany. So here I am sitting in Kentucky, and I need to talk to this Kenan dude in Germany. And so we get on the phone, and I was like, hey, can you build me a website? Sure. I need it up in 3 weeks. Well, that's going to be hard to do. An entire e-commerce website in 3 weeks. Yeah. I mean, what's the problem? Don't you build websites?
Tact. April.
Yeah,
tact.
Exactly. He did it. So, I mean, and he's still with me 11 years later.
Oh, that's awesome. Is he still in Germany?
No, he's here now.
He moved
here about a year ago. Yeah, when we decided to amp up a little bit and go into more growth mode, he moved here.
Fabulous. So did Calico kind of evolve to Inc? Is that how the business has developed? Tell us a little bit of that story.
Yeah, so grew Studio Calico to be about a $5 million business on its own, and was noticing that, I knew that scrapbooking wouldn't be around forever, and it was sad, but a realistic fact. Like, my family's livelihood was dependent on this, and we were not. And any entrepreneur will tell you this, but we were in high growth mode at Studio Calico, growing about 20%. Sometimes up to 70% year over year. And that eats cash.
Yeah.
So like in a big way. And I would talk with my accountant, because this was before I had finance people and knew still don't know what I'm doing, but knew what I was doing to some degree. And I was like, it
You've
says
hired
we
some
made
good people
all
that
this.
know what they're doing,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Now I've hired people. But it says like I've made all this money. Why isn't that money in my bank account? And I couldn't figure out why the money that I'd made was not in my bank account. And because all my customers thought I was rolling in the dough, and by the bank state or by the P&L, I should be having money, but I didn't understand there was a cash flow statement. So sadly, but anyway, noticed that collaborations were really taking off. Like every time we would do a collaboration with an influencer, the product would sell really well.
Describe a collaboration. I'm not sure I know what you mean by that.
So a collaboration where we would work with a designer or an influencer who would influence or direct the design in some way of a product that we were doing, and we would co-brand the product. So we would say it's Lindsay Letters plus Studio Calico. And then all of a sudden her sales in her own store would go up and ours would go up as well. And it was just really nice to marry people from different industries. And yes, lots of synergy. And so those were doing well. And so we started doing some more long-term collaborations. And one of them was with Allie Edwards. And as a friend and kind of very informal advisor to her, I mean, we would just talk for hours about how where the scrapbooking industry was headed and what what she needed to be on the lookout for, like lessons that I had learned, and my concerns that I had, her concerns. I mean, we were in it, man. We were in it. And so we would talk, and finally it got to the point where we were like, well, we should just do this together. And we should white label our site, consolidate all of her ideas into one brand, her own brand, where she can talk directly to her customers. And instead of having it happen in a lot of different disparate locations, she could just talk to them directly. And it sounded novel. It was so novel at the time because nobody else had done it. And we launched her site, and in the first year did $1.5 million in revenue. And that was fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
And last year she ended up well over 2 million. And I mean, we've just continued to grow that brand. And it just really shows what happens when you have an influencer and a thought leader that is so connected with their following and they are their following for all intents and purposes, and who cares so deeply about creating meaningful and relevant product and what they can do whenever they have the infrastructure to support it. So then we've just set out to replicate that again and again.
Took that principle and then went to look for other folks that you could do the same partnering with.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. That's cool.
So
that's cool.
We learned a lot, and Allie will tell you we learned a lot together.
Yeah. Is it a revenue sharing model? Is it a revenue sharing model then, or how does that work?
Sure. The economics generally work. We usually do like some type of profit share. Right. So we have predefined expenses not to exceed, and then we share the profit.
And you do that with each partner. On the same. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And what would you say are kind of the core values or the core, not so much values, the core strategies that you bring to the party? What is it that your organization has that level of expertise of that really adds value to the partnership?
Well, one, I think we have an operational willingness and are set up to work with influencers, and not all businesses are or can be, but we can turn on a dime pretty fast. Yeah. And we were set up like that from the beginning. And I think that's important to note, the operational willingness first and foremost. And then secondly, it's we have a back end to our site set up to allow the communications back and forth, and to basically allow them to design the product and help us develop the product and be heavily involved in the process. And we do everything from design, sourcing, and developing product down to marketing, like email marketing, especially digital ad buys, customer service, fulfillment. And we do it in a very boutique way, in a very personal way, because these people are their brand and they're connecting. It's another way for them to connect with their followers.
Right.
And we have to be an offshoot of that. We can't be unaligned to their mission overall.
And are they mostly consumer products? Do you do consumer services? Are there B2Bs? How does it kind of classify in the traditional sense of verticals?
I think that we're very category defining, and there's
Yeah.
nobody out there that's doing exactly what we do. So, if I had to put it in a box, I would say B2B to C.
Yeah. Got it.
But because partially the influencer is our customer, but really they're more, we call them our brand partner.
Yeah.
They bring the ideation and promotion to the table, and we bring the infrastructure and know-how of how to run these businesses and brands. So
Very novel. Yeah. Love it. And how many employees today, April?
53.
Wow. Fantastic.
So,
and I know you're privately
several
held.
of them are.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, privately held, and several of them are. We do our own fulfillment in house, and that may not always be the case. Hopefully, we'll be opening up a DC on the West Coast in the coming years. I mean, this is not an announcement.
Right.
Hopefully, we'll grow to the point where a DC on the West Coast is needed. But right now, we're happy to be located right here in Kentucky on the I-65 corridor, where lots of goods and packages are shipped out from because it's a very short window.
North of 10 million in sales. Where are you on that ramp?
We have grazed the 9 mark.
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
That's great.
Fantastic.
Yes, well, that's great. Well on our way.
Terrific. Let's talk a little bit about your people. You've obviously had to grow an organization. Sounds like you had some good folks that you kind of brought along with you, the Kennons and the others. But when you are making bets on people, what are some of the things you look for? What are you looking for when you invest in folks?
Goodness, what do we look for? First of all, obviously integrity. I think that it's so important. That is, that has to be there. And we look for smart people. That doesn't mean good grades. That just means I myself and our COO and all the leadership they can't think for other people. Like that would, we would be moving backwards as an organization if we had to do the thinking for everyone. And I really want to hire smart people who know and will do better than me at just about anything.
So smart doesn't necessarily mean coming from a top school. It could mean savvy, or as we talked earlier, scrappy and savvy. Yes. Are you looking for people? Do you hire people that come in without university degrees, for example?
Yes. Yeah. I never even, to be honest, I never even looked to see if they have a university degree, which is so funny coming from the straight A student, but I don't even care. Yeah. So, and then last, I would say we look for happy people, because you can't train people to be happy. You just can't train happy. Right. So you just have to be a happy, pleasant person. Doesn't mean that you can't have hard times, because that happens to everyone, but you just generally need to be a positive person.
How deep do you personally go into the interviewing process? Are you, I'm sure, interviewing your own direct reports, but do you go a level or two below? Do you have a pretty flat organization? You get involved in all interviewing?
We're fairly flat, but I definitely don't get involved in all interviewing. Our fulfillment team, they're pretty self-sufficient, and it's only the leadership roles that I'll get involved in there, or anybody that is promoted from within. I'm definitely very hands-on in like how we promote, how we set up our compensation, how we communicate compensation, and I'm very, very open about that. Like I want to be as transparent as we can as an organization, and be creative there, because we're still a small company, and people forget. They hear 50 and they think you're a huge company. You were not a big company. We are not at all a big company. So, I think that I need to be as hands-on as possible, but there's always those times where you can't, and you have to trust. But when I can, I'm definitely involved. And in anybody kind of definitely director, VP level. And then I love to be involved with the management as well.
What about on the sales side? Do you get deeper in that organization, that part of the organization?
So sales reports directly up to me. Okay. So I'm fairly involved there.
Somehow I thought that'd be the case.
I'm incredibly passionate there and have strong opinions. You can take the girl out of sales, but you can never take sales out of the girl, right? That's right. That's right.
Tell us about some of the interview questions that really have worked for you in the past as you've gone and tried to select some folks, particularly getting some of these.
Oh, goodness. I'm so passionate. I love interviewing.
Yeah.
I love interviewing so much. And I think it's because I got so much practice at it early on that from one of my mentors, he would tell me how to do it. And he was hilarious. I'm talking about Kevin from Michigan. He would stop people about 5 minutes in if he knew we weren't going to hire them. And he would start coaching them on how to how to
conduct
interview for
themselves.
their next job. He was fantastic. I was like, you have such guts to do that to somebody. I've never done that, but he was fantastic at it. And he didn't do it. It wasn't like mean. He was really trying to help people. He's like, okay, we can spend the next 20 minutes with me, like trying to like entertain you that you have a chance at this position, or I could spend the next 20 minutes talking to you about how you can improve so that you can get the next job. Yes, he was fantastic. He was fantastic.
Would you do that as well?
And honestly,
did you ever emulate that?
No, I've never done that. I've never had the guts to do that. But my key phrase though is I think I have what I need. So I will say that's my one piece of advice. Always when you go into an interview with we usually have two people when I'm in the interview. And so if I know I've made the decision and we're not moving forward with this candidate, my phrase is, I think I have what I need.
You look at the other person
and the other person knows.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Let's go. But
well, let's say you find someone that you like, and how do you?
What questions do I ask?
What kind of questions work for you to get at some of those things? Because it's hard. It's hard in a 20 or 30-minute interview to get at things like trust and integrity.
Yes. One is I want to know why inked. And I'll usually just ask why inked. And that helps me understand how much they know about the company. If they don't know anything about the company, then we're done. Like that's it.
Let's wrap it up.
By and large, by the time they get to me, they know the answer to that question. And so then it's about assessing that. Or I'll ask them, what do you know about inked? But we get a lot because we're in the digital age, and we do a lot on social media. So I usually ask them, who do you follow on social, like people or brands? Because that tells me a lot about what type of, like, what do they like? And I really want to know what they like. And then if they tell me like, oh, I follow Everlane, then that tells me they're up on trends and they're going to be maybe interested in some unique marketing, a community-based marketing versus I shop at Amazon, or something like that, or I follow Amazon. I love asking them because we're in a super scrappy environment. And so prioritization and organization is key. You're never going to get everything checked off your to-do list. So I need to make sure the people that we hire know what's important and how to prioritize. So I usually ask them in terms of the past, like I'm an old school. I like the STAR technique, like tell me in the past what you did, because that'll better predict future behavior. So tell me about a time when you couldn't get it done. How did you prioritize and what was the result? And usually can tell from that answer if there really was a time, if they've thought through it and or not. You can tell good and bad answers there real fast. I love this question. Who managed you the best and why? Because like we were talking about earlier, I want to know if they're going to, just as much if it's a fit for them, is it a fit for us? And, or just as much if it's, I said that backwards, just as much if it's a fit for us, they need to determine if it's a fit for them. I want to make sure that they work well with that manager and usually her skills, and then I think the last best question I have is, what questions do you have for me?
Yeah, right.
So, because I want to know what they want to know.
And if they've come in with a written list, that's impressive, right? If they try to think up, start thinking up something off the top. I always tell our final candidates, if you haven't done it already, please write down your questions, even if you have them memorized, because it makes a favorable impression. It shows that you're prepared.
Absolutely. And you make sure like you can at least say, oh, we covered this. And then you feel like you're having a conversation as opposed to it being so one-sided with one person asking questions and waiting for the answer.
That's very good you do that, because so often candidates don't spend enough time really trying to understand whether or not the culture is right for them. And, in our recruiting practice, we spend a lot of time, particularly doing psychometric and psychographic tests and other types of indicators of how well they may fit into that culture. Because frankly, best qualifications in the world, will only get you so far if you're not going to be able to fit in and get along well with the hiring manager, let alone the overall company culture. Do you use any of those types of tests? Do you use DISC tests or any type of psychographic or psychometric in your evaluation of potential candidates?
No, but our HR director would love me to. we are like in this whole like budget. We just have like so little budget because we're in growth mode that we don't do that as much as we should. But I think that that'll definitely be in our future. That it's very important to us. Culture is so incredibly important, like you said.
And against April, I mean, there's just no way in a half an hour, 45 minutes, you can get that information. It's very difficult.
No, it's very difficult. Yeah, I think that those, but if they have done them, we ask them. We generally ask them if they've
Yeah,
taken them, and like I think there's like this Enneagram, and we'll screen for
right.
a lot of that. We'll just ask them if
Sure.
they've taken it and
Share
see
it
what
with
it
us.
see what they come out with. Yeah, share with us if
Well,
you've done
have
this
your HR
before.
director give me a
But
call. We've got some very cost-effective solutions I could share with him or her.
okay,
But
good,
yeah, it is.
good.
We probably, I would say, April, particularly at the executive level. I literally had 3 done last night. We're finishing up a CFO search for a $300 million company on the West Coast, and I had every one of them take it, and the CEO has taken it as well.
Hmm.
And I compare and contrast, and when it gets close, and you've got 2 or 3 really strong contenders, particularly for that executive position, you can't afford to make mistakes. And getting that
Hmm.
executive fit is so important. And unfortunately, a lot of CEOs tend to hire people that are like themselves, and usually those are the worst hires.
Hmm.
Because they can be the best of friends, but
They
they
are
have the same
terrible
blind
hires.
spots, right? You need
That's
that
exactly
diversity.
right. No, I try to definitely
Yeah,
hire to my weaknesses, and I want my managers
awesome.
to do the same
Awesome.
thing. You
Couple
know.
last questions. I know we're getting close to time here, and this is kind of a personal question, but you did bring it up earlier, and I always like to ask this if it's something that kind of comes up. And you mentioned about your faith, and obviously having grown up in the church, and giving your charitable contributions as you went. Is that a part of your company? Is that the values that either you've learned, or is it something that's more transparent in terms of your faith-based beliefs? And does that play out in Inked? Hmm.
Honestly, it doesn't. Well, I mean, I hate to answer so flatly like that, but we're not like a faith-based company. We don't have like
Right,
prayer
right.
hour or anything like
Chaplain
that.
on board.
We yes, no, no, we don't. But I do think that we are a very like
Yeah,
good, wholesome
the
organization to be
morals
a
and
part
the
of. I
ethics
think people
are in
come
line.
here and they yes, from a moral and an ethical standpoint, and I think that is mainly because that's who I like to be surrounded by, and so our first few key hires were people who are
Yeah,
just good people, like
right,
honestly good people, and then they hire other good people, and it's like Steve Jobs said, the A student will hire another A student, and but a B student is
right,
likely to hire a
right.
C. So I'm sure I've totally
No,
misquoted that, but
I've heard
you
that
get the
before.
point.
Yeah.
And so I think yeah, I think that when people when you have a culture that is so friendly and so welcoming and so kind and loving, and we've had some people that have had personal
Yeah.
tragedies here, and the group rallies around them, and it's just
You tend to
you
attract
end
the
up
same like kind.
attracting more people like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yes, exactly. But I think there's good people in every faith, and um or in
yeah.
even no faith. So there's lots of good people out there, and we really just look to make sure that they fit from a cultural perspective, and from a are they smart? Are they happy? Are they positive people? Do they have a
Right.
high degree of integrity? And you can have that no
What your
matter
walk may have
no
been.
matter what your
Very good
background
point.
is. Hmm.
Last question for
Yes,
you. Any,
absolutely.
career and life advice, particularly to new college grads, or maybe some of our middle market audience that are, got their eyes on getting into the C-suite or perhaps their own corner office. What are some of the key things that when you look back at your career and think about, the things that have really made you successful? What would you say some of those key characteristics are, and the key thread through many of your experiences?
For sure, making
Mhm.
connections and networking, and I think that is key. Is like I didn't realize how important that was early on, and it's so important. And that kind of goes along with making those connections and taking internships, and don't not
Right.
working for the money, working for where your areas of interest in, and where you can see yourself being, what you're passionate about doing, and it's so true. When you're young, don't work for the
Yeah.
money,
And
work for
even
the
like you did as
experience.
that
And
internship as a
for
speech pathologist, sometimes it's important to do things that you find out
yes,
you don't like, because then that's, a dead end. You don't have
you
to go
don't want
further
to
down, right?
do. Yeah, it saved me a lot of heartache. I would have been like had a master's
Right.
degree that I wasn't going to do anything with, and I would have been owing money instead of
Yeah.
not receiving it. But I also think that like paying attention is
Mm.
so important. Like, I just try to pay attention to everything I'm doing. And I think it's important for everyone, no matter what job they're in, to just pay attention. Like, be on it, like, look at everything, look at what's going on in other industries that can
Yeah.
be applicable to yours, and find those key things that could be a differentiator for yourself. And then last, I would say, like, figure out what it is that you enjoy. And there's something about every job. Like, when I first started Studio Calico and I was packing boxes every day, I knew that I really liked. I mean, I loved
Right.
making the box, like, and I also love pulling the order. I don't know. I like so many things. I can get passionate about just about anything. But like, I would have races with our staff to see who could fold the most boxes in a minute. And then when we were weighing boxes, I would try to guess how much some of them weighed, to see. I was trying to figure out, like, what was the average size weight box that we sent out without having to look it up, and actually found some errors. There were problems that we had in our
Wow.
system because of it. So, I mean, just paying attention and being observant and figuring
Yeah.
out what you like about what you do can lead you further down the right path. And so,
Wonderful. Well, April Foster, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you again so much for your time. Really have enjoyed hearing your story.
thank you. Enjoyed it myself.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.